In Redrum's first Grand National win, he snatched victory in the very shadow of the winning post in one of the most famous of all Aintree finishes. Now his trainer, Ginger McCain, seen here before Redrum's illness, is afraid that old age has finally caught up. 4 years ago, the Princess Royal unveiled a bronze statue on Grand National Day at Aintree to immortalise the most celebrated horse in the history of the race. His greatest moment came in 1977 when he romped home to win his third national, earning his place in the history books and in the hearts of the nation.
Three months of toil and sweat were put to the test with the first race meeting held on the new number 2 track. The carnival atmosphere was evident on a beautiful summer's day. Some racegoers just content to sit and chat, others ready to fork out their hard-earned cash in search of a winner. No one was too eager, however, to make something favourite in the first, the maiden handicap, the opening event in a new era of racing at Tamworth. Still on horseback, an intense week has finished for 15 youngsters hopeful of gaining a place in the New South Wales Junior Polocross team. For the past few days, the squad has gone through its paces at Guyra and Armidale. All the hard work will pay off for 7 members of the squad who will eventually represent their state at the Australian Championships in Forbes.
They've had some good instruction. We've had national, international players instructing. They've done really well. We've got a little, as I said, we had a little bit of rain to start with, but that didn't really matter. We had half a day off and they went through videos, programming, the whole thing.
A pretty even start for Heat 2, with Thursday's second place getter Mackay Marine up amongst the leaders. As the rain pelted down and with further prospects of heavy falls, it was important to stamp an authority on the race early, and Beechwood Homes 2, skippered by Gary Brunnages, did just that. Others, however, made life difficult for not only themselves by parking in obscure places, but other competitors who were trying to round certain boys on the course. As the race developed, Beechwood Homes 2 just skipped away from the rest of the fleet, and with 2 wins from 2 heats, is the clear leader in the Australian 16-foot skiff championship. Almost 4 minutes behind Beechwood was another Belmont boat, Castrian Holmes, skippered by John Millwood, and then followed Manly boat AAMI, skippered by Julian Bethwaite. The third heat will be sailed tomorrow.
Vandals went on a destruction run in the early hours of Sunday morning. 4 car yards were hit in Maitland and Raymond Terrace. At Bob Wilson's Motors, 21 of his 22 vehicles were damaged with scratch marks. The cost of repairs, $10,000. Police investigations have put it down to juveniles on a wild night out.
It would appear that for people to commit these type of offences that there would be drugs involved, and whether we can blame alcohol for it or some other form of drug, but people thinking clearly wouldn't commit the senseless damage that's been committed.
Police say every weekend minor offences are reported. About once a month a serious attack occurs on a local car yard. One dealer has had 4 raids in the last 8 months. From tonight, police working in alliance with security firms will be increasing their patrols of the area, but they say they can use some extra help.
I would make an appeal to members of the public. We need your help in this regard, and that is if they see people acting suspiciously in car yards, or even if they think they only appear to be looking at cars in the early hours of the morning, we can then make a call to the Maitland Police Station.
Dealer Bob Wilson has offered $500 for any information leading to a conviction. Another owner has hinted he too could add to the reward. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The The November jobless figures are from the Bureau's quarterly survey of regional unemployment. Total unemployment in the Hunter rose considerably from 7.8% in November 1990 to 11.3% in 1991. According to the Bureau, total employment in the region dropped from 198,800 in November 1990 to 183,700 for the same period in 1991. That 7.5% decrease appears to have forced more people to look for work, and according to the Bureau, it's not promising. The number of people unable to find full-time or part-time work rose from 16,800 in November 1990 to 23,400 for the same period a year later. But Newcastle is faring better than the state's other steel city, Wollongong. Down south, there's chronic 15.3% unemployment, with youth unemployment topping 50%.
At Bullaroo, 44-year-old builder Mana Charlton of Bellbird had just begun work on extensions to a house in 5th Street when a driverless van that had been parked higher up the steep street careered through the front fence and into Mr Charlton as he was fitting timber to the corner of the front veranda. He was killed instantly by the impact, his body being trapped under the van where it came to rest in a rockery. The Police Accident Investigation Squad has begun an inquiry into why the van, which was heavily loaded with hydraulic fittings, ran down the hill.
Nick Wood has a couple of good new reasons to be world champion, a thought which didn't escape him at Surfers Paradise on the weekend.
Trying to do my best for my fiancée Nat and my new baby boy Jacob, and trying to get some money back home for him.
Nick picked up $7,000 in the City Beach Pro, outpointing Tony Ray, Glenn Winton and Byron Bay surfer Craig Holly. Last year, Wood slipped 6 places from 12th to 18th in the world rankings, but this year, with his new trophies proudly by his side, he's ready to fire.
Definitely be trying that little bit extra harder, for sure.
Nick and Natalie are already planning 4-day-old Jacob's sporting future. They hope he'll make it as a pro golfer. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
At the Spears Point Sailing Club on Lake Macquarie, catamarans are strutting their stuff in the Australian Arrow class, cats that are 14 foot in length. Along with the Arrows, the Arrow Fura cats are competing and they are 12 feet in length. Like most other sailing regattas, the championship will be sailed over 7 heats, with each crew able to drop their worst result. But already it looks like a one-boat race in the Arrows. Frank O'Rourke from Port Macquarie has won the national title for the past 7 years, and once again he's well on the way to yet another crown, winning the first 3 heats. Behind O'Rourke, who was sailing 0, is Victorian yachtsman Dale Bryant aboard Lady in Red, and then follows Queenslander Darryl Skinner skippering Air Power 2.
Swarms of salt marsh mosquitoes have been making their presence felt for the past few days. The female of the species is hungry for blood to feed her young. A combination of high tides and coastal rainfall has made breeding conditions ideal in the swamps and wetlands ringing Newcastle.
Predominantly it is a tormenting mosquito which worries the people severely, but it does carry the Ross River virus, which causes a type of arthritis, and that is a concern also.
An eradication army of just 2 men goes out each day against overwhelming odds, spraying and seeding marshlands with organic insecticides, targeting the wrigglers or larvae. The method is effective but is a drop in the ocean against the wind-borne swarms. Each mosquito may live for weeks. Eggs are laid by the hundreds. The best advice for avoiding contact with the mosquitoes is to cover up and use repellent.
We've probably reached the peak now. The numbers should start to subside, but if we get more rain, the whole process could start all over again.
Of the 2,500 species of mosquitoes, about 100 are known disease carriers. Health authorities rule out the transmission of AIDS by mosquitoes.
The only advice we have is that there is no possibility of the mosquito conveying AIDS at this stage from the studies done. So I certainly hope that's the case.
When the quality of patient care services provided by a hospital is high, it receives a 3-year accreditation from the Australian Council on Healthcare Standards. The Mater has received the results of its review and the prognosis was not good. It has been given only a 1-year accreditation. On the critical list were the outdated operating theatres. President of the Hunter Medical Association, Dr Chris Howe, is also concerned.
The major problem is that the buildings are woeful, the whole setup is woeful. It needs a major injection of funds. It is now our number 2 hospital in the region and it just is not good enough.
The boss of the Mater, Londa Makepeace, agrees that the theatres need to be improved. While some band-aid measures have been taken to upgrade the facilities, it's unlikely that in the next decade there'll be a significant injection of funds to build a new complex.
It would seem at this point that government is not in a position to allocate funds for that project.
The Mater is confident that the hospital will have improved sufficiently by next year to receive the full 3-year accreditation. Jane Anderson, NBN News. Cane toads were introduced into Queensland to control pests in cane fields, but they rapidly bred out of control and have now spread as far south as Grafton in New South Wales. Last week, 2 cane toads were found in the Hunter. One was picked up by a police officer at Bulladilla, the other run over on the Pacific Highway near Raymond Terrace. It's uncertain how the 2 interlopers came to be in the area.
The fact that both individuals have been found very close to the Pacific Highway would suggest that they're either accidental imports, stowaways in a truck or car coming down from the North Coast or from Queensland, or somebody's perhaps deliberately brought them down and released them, which would be a fairly unfortunate and irresponsible thing to do.
Irresponsible because if they establish themselves as a breeding population in the area, they would have a disastrous effect on the environment.
There are a number of snakes that normally feed on frogs that would be severely affected if they were to feed on the cane toad, and native mammals such as the native quolls would be almost certainly killed if they consume cane toads.
Anyone who finds a cane toad should be careful handling it. They secrete a poison which can irritate the eyes. Cane toads should be given to the National Parks and Wildlife or Department of Agriculture for identification. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The Port Stephens Shire Council allows free access to the 26-kilometre stretch of North Stockton Beach for registered vehicles from 2 main entry points, one near Williamtown, the other to the north at Berube Point. A specific area is also set aside for unregistered RTA-approved recreational vehicles. The shifting sand dunes offer a unique attraction to off-roaders who journey from Sydney and the south coast.
Sand riding's sort of pretty popular, but it's hard to do because there's not many places along in Australia and New South Wales you can ride on the sand.
That's why we had to come all the way up here, because it's legal.
The beach is popular with fishermen, picnickers and surfers. In the summer, up to 300 vehicles run the tide line. According to the council rangers, a minority are spoiling it for the rest, destroying vegetation and endangering lives. They say bans may be necessary.
Most of the fishermen don't cause any trouble. It's only the yahoos that spoil it for everybody.
We want people to be able to come and sit on the beach, sunbathe, swim, know that they're safe, know that their children are safe, just toddlers walking around on the beach. Don't have to be worried about looking for a four-wheel drive that might be going to run them over.
One of the busiest areas is Berube Point. Council is attempting to isolate the vehicles by way of bypass ramps.
All we're asking them to do is to use it sensibly, be responsible, and Stockton Beach will continue to be used. Use it irresponsibly, and unfortunately council will have to police it in some way that will restrict their use.
See what I bought. I bought coloured lights and ornaments and tinsel. Look.
In August 1990, Noel Manning was forced to land his Cherokee 140 in a field near Cessnock after heavy fog turned the sky into pea soup. But now he claims it's not the weather that's keeping his plane out of the air, but shoddy maintenance done by a Hunter Valley company in July last year. Mr Manning alleges work that was purportedly completed during the 56-hour overhaul wasn't done.
Fuel tanks were supposed to be calibrated and everything. I have a major oil fuel leak out of my right tank in the wing. The main oil line that feeds your motor has was welded itself to the exhaust pipe.
Mr Manning claims that an engineer told him the oversights were potentially life-threatening.
Well, what would have happened first, he said the oil line would have burnt through, you would have caught on fire and you would have crashed within 1 hour of flying.
A Civil Aviation Authority representative inspected the plane at Cessnock Airport today, taking photos and following up Mr Manning's complaints. The CAA official wasn't prepared to comment on the allegations until he spoke to the maintenance company, although he did identify one concern.
The only thing I could say is that this should have been properly tied back so that it didn't come in contact with the exhaust.
Mr Manning says it's taken months for the CAA to follow up his complaint, and even now that his plane has been inspected, he says he's still not satisfied.
They're not prepared to approach the mechanics or anything and, reprimand them.
The maintenance company won't comment on Mr Manning's allegations. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Newcastle University now has 13,500 students. This year it expects a 5% increase or 700 extra students. University staff met today to discuss the anticipated rise. To start with, Newcastle University will offer 6,000 places to new students. A 70% acceptance rate is expected, the high level a reflection of the economy.
Unemployment in the Hunter is around about 18%. We anticipate that there's going to be pretty vigorous competition for places.
Market forces also affect the number of positions offered. An oversupply of nurses has seen this year's intake of new nursing students reduced.
We try to manipulate, if you like, our acceptance rates to try and reflect the employment prospects.
Another sign of the changing times is a move by the federal government to encourage funding from other sources, such as industry and business.
To try to bring home to industry and commerce that as the recipients, if you like, of the benefits of higher education, that they should contribute more directly.
While the Newcastle University has developed its own sponsorship programs with local industry, the University of New England has just received the green light from the federal government for a new funding program involving industry and commerce. Developed by the university, the 3-year pilot program involves 60% funding by the government, the other 40% from industry. This year the scheme will create almost 700 new places Australia-wide. Of that, New England gets 160. As well as this, New England is expecting its overall enrolments to increase by almost 5%.
In the public eye, ambulance officers are seen as vital for saving lives, but on January the 18th, representatives from the Hunter Service will be swapping bandages for banners. The ambulance officers will be in the entrance on polling day for the crucial by-election, waving placards and telling voters the Greiner government has not supported the service properly.
We believe that since the Liberal government has been in power, the ambulance services has been in a state of limbo, and in fact ambulance services have actually gone backwards.
This will be the first time that the Hunter's ambulance officers have involved themselves in a political campaign, but they say with the government continually running down the service, they've been forced to fight. The officers' fears are heightened by a government white paper, as yet unreleased, examining the ambulance service.
We believe the corporate white paper will be detrimental to the ambulance officers, the service and the people that they serve, and we challenge the government to release that white paper before the by-election in the entrance.
The officers have asked the Labor candidate in the entrance, Grant McBride, to add his voice to their challenge to the government.
We say it's available. It was available before the by-election. If you've got nothing to hide, let's make it public.
The New South Wales Police Association has circulated 50,000 pamphlets proclaiming their disillusionment with the government. At this stage, no Hunter officers will be joining in the entrance campaign, but that could change.
If they change their opinion and they want police to go down from Newcastle, I can guarantee there'll be at least one bus load go down for sure.
"22-year-old Peter James Prigg of Marks Point made a brief appearance before a magistrate at the Newcastle Police Station this morning. Police allege Prigg travelled by taxi from his Marks Point home to a block of flats in Charlestown just after 10 p.m. Armed with a .32-40 calibre Winchester lever-action rifle, he asked the taxi driver to wait, entered a flat and shot the victim in the face. A woman at the flat alerted police, who later arrested Prigg at gunpoint in a lakeside park at Marks Point. He was remanded in custody to appear in Newcastle Court on Monday. The victim remains in the John Hunter Hospital in a serious but stable condition. It's believed he lost an eye in the shooting.
Events on the beach ran their normal course, with competition as fierce as any major carnival, but when the lifesavers hit the water, the conditions were a little tricky, especially for one young ski paddler who had trouble staying on, and even more problems in remounting his trusty steed. The boat seemed to handle the upward journey pretty well, but the signs were there that the trip home wasn't going to be any picnic. Caves Beach handled the approach to terra firma with a great deal of skill and control. The Merryweather crew got it all wrong, and the look on the face of the sweep as the green wall reared its head behind him told the story. Rugby league giant Adrian Bubb found it easier out of the boat than in it. In the prestigious Ironman contest, Drew Blatchford continued his outstanding season, leading from woe to go. He opened up a big lead and increased that in the ski, powering home on the board to dominate the event. At Terrigal Beach last night, the 11th lifeguard challenge between the Gosford Shire lifeguards and the custodians from the Wyong Shire. The latter has had a mortgage on the challenge over the 10 years, winning on 7 occasions. But as is the case every now and then, the favourite gets a flogging. And last night, that's what happened. Gosford won every event on the card, which included the tube rescue relay, the swim relay, the board and lifeguard relay. But the real drubbing came in the all-important lifeguard mission event, a swim run board contest, and Gosford filled the first 6 placings. The final point score was unavailable for publication.
But there were problems for Ben Roebuck, who was a last-minute entry riding Simon Rodwell's bike. Paramedics attended Roebuck, whose arm was caught in the frame of the bike. He was later taken by chopper to the John Hunter Hospital, where he's in a satisfactory condition today. A hospital spokesperson says 7 injured riders were treated at the John Hunter yesterday. Newcastle is the first of a 7-round National Supercross series. 16-year-old Anthony Gobert from Oakdale won the event. Victorian Craig Dack was second and Glenn Bell third. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The 13 employees at Maitland's Norman Ross store found out late yesterday that provisional liquidator Martin Brown was taking a broom to 12 outlets in the chain, and their workplace was one of them.
Bad news, mate, isn't it?
The store will stop trading at the end of the month, but at noon today, the employees had a practice run at shutting the doors to prepare for a closing down sale which begins tomorrow. For the lucky few customers in the shop just before closing time, there were bargains to be had.
Table and chair set is the best we've seen so far.
But for the staff, like employee of 22 years, Marge Barker, emotion overshadowed the cheap prices.
Very sad. There's a lot of people out of work and there's no jobs to get. And there's young people with young families. It's very bad.
What has bewildered and annoyed staff about the closure is that this store has consistently made good profits. In fact, this outlet was awarded for being the best performer in Norman Ross's October sale.
The decision was taken, as far as I can see, by the receivers and not by retailers. I can't see a reason for it, and I was quite confident that we wouldn't be one of the stores that were closing.
Mr. Wellington says the store's closure will send a chilling message to the commercial heart of Maitland.
Well, I think obviously if Norman Ross, being one of the major retailers in the town, closes, the possibility is that anybody could close.
Norman Ross's Katara store is not included on the closure list, with the manager saying it's business as usual for him and his 13 staff. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
For many people, playing basketball is a feat in itself. Playing the sport in a wheelchair takes a special kind of motivation. But 22-year-old Liesl Tisch wouldn't have it any other way.
I don't think it's any tougher. It's just different. If on the able-bodied court, you have to think about, if you see a space, you just think, oh, I'll run through there. In a wheelchair, you've got that much space to fit through. You've got that much space, so you've got to look, and it's a lot more of a thinking game.
After an accident 4 years ago left her a paraplegic, Liesl refused to accept that she'd never walk again and would have to postpone her science degree.
Life is this short and we've got to fit this much in, get out there, do every single thing you can. In my mind, there was no way I wasn't going to walk again, and slowly sort of struggling through, the bruising and swelling went down.
Now she can walk, has recently graduated and has been selected to represent her country. Achieving that level hasn't been easy either. Liesl does fitness training 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, and another 3 hours daily on the basketball court. Australia is little known on the international Paralympic basketball scene, but Liesl is out to change that at the qualifying tournament in England.
Look out, world, we're going to win. We're getting a medal.
The only remaining hurdle for Liesl is raising enough money to cover her overseas trip. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Residents at Thompson Road Spears Point alerted the fire brigade as dense smoke and flames engulfed the Fibro and Iron Cottage. Set back on 5 acres of lakeside land, the derelict building had been home to 65-year-old Felix Weimer for 28 years. He'd lived as a hermit with no power or water and only made occasional trips to nearby shops. Neighbours' fears that he was caught in the fire were allayed when he returned from a shopping trip. Mr Weimer's meagre possessions went up in the blaze that started just after 11 and gutted the building.
Over 28 years, I never had a fire going here. I never had any fire. I never started. I didn't need it.
He'd stayed on at the house after working as a fruit picker on the property, once an orchard.
I don't know what I'm going to do now.
Neighbours comforted the man and are arranging temporary accommodation for him. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News. "18-year-old Felicity Crimmings was driving on the Singleton Army Camp back road west of Newcastle, returning to a home at Whittingham after a night out with friends. At about 3 a.m, her luxury sedan careered out of control on a shallow bend and slammed into a power pole, blacking out nearby Branxton. The crash was reported just minutes later by a passing taxi driver. Emergency services on the scene found that the young woman had not been wearing a seatbelt. She died before receiving medical attention. Canal jumping is an Aussie adaptation of a Dutch sport. It's all good old-fashioned fun, with proceeds going to the local volunteer bushfire brigade and an emphasis on safe participation. Just this morning they made an eel sweep of the creek before the jumping began. Others wrestled the greasy pole, some opting for brute strength, a few using their heads. Pillow fights were in full swing, along with chocolate wheels and woodchop contests. The fundraising queen was sashed for selling more than $1,000 worth of raffle tickets. Back at the creek, contestants threw all they had at beating a 12 3/4 metre vault. They breed 'em tough in the country, but even these cowboys and girls will have to have the King G's on if they hope to survive 6 rounds of the national rodeo titles. All of the traditional rodeo events will be contested, and in the bull riding, world-renowned chainsaw will be amongst the grazing cattle, waiting for the unprepared cowboy. Making a return to the Nationals is the 1989 all-round champion Troy Dunn, who spent a fair bit of time in Canada and the United States last year, where he had good results. Also main contenders, former champs Gary Longley and Robert McPhee, and they'll be hard to beat over the 6 rounds.